We are back working on the abandoned STI presented by Turn 14 Distribution. Today we start to reassemble this thing. First we're going to show off the blasted parts from Stripping Tech, going to paint them up and start putting the rear end back under the car. As you can see, the rear subframe is looking fresh and new again, or at least it will be once I put a coat of POR 15 on it. We took all these parts to our buddy JP at Stripping Tech in Cambridge, Ontario, and he blasted them and coated some of the arms, which I'll show you in a moment. We chose not to have him coat the subframe because it has to go in the oven for powder coating, and it's brought up to a fairly high temperature, and we weren't sure how the bushings would survive that experience. So we chose to just have them blasted, and we're going to coat it ourselves with some POR 15. We obviously already had him blast the knuckles and control arms, and these are like the brake brackets, spindle bracket things. So all of this stuff is going to get painted. I'm not going to paint the aluminum control arms because they look good in raw aluminum. JP even loaned us his tumbler here to clean up all the rusty nuts and bolts. We've given those a treatment overnight with the tumbler, and you can see how clean they came out. They were really rusty beforehand. And you can see he also did powder coat some of these rear arms for us.
And they look like new again.
They look incredible. It's kind of embarrassing how much better this looks than my POR 15 job on the BMW, but I'll try to do a more careful, precise job with the POR 15 on this stuff because we really want this car to look as good as we can. But man, powder coating a part really does give it a beautiful finish. Look at how nice that looks. So if you guys are looking for quality powder coating, check our buddy JP out at Stripping Tech. All right, it's time for Arts and Crafts with Dave. Starting with our POR 15 rust preventative permanent coating. I've used this stuff before, as you would have saw in the rear end of the BMW. I also used it on the rear axle of my Celica, and it works extremely well. It makes a very tough coating, and it goes on really thin. So even though a quart like this might not look like a lot in terms of coverage, truth is you get a ton of coverage out of this amount. It ain't cheap though. This was like 75 bucks Canadian.
Ouch.
So yeah, it's not cheap stuff, but they actually recommend pouring it into another container so that you're not dipping the brush into the main container and contaminating it. I'm not really sure, how big a deal that is, but let's go ahead and follow their instructions. So poured some in there. And by the way, the last time I bought this stuff, the lid just gets destroyed taking it off, and it doesn't want to make a good seal again. So we poured it all into like a Tupperware container, hoping that would seal up well, but it really didn't. It would like grow a skin over time in there. So given how pricey this stuff is, we'd really like to find a vacuum sealed container that we can pour this into. So if you guys have any recommendations for something to transfer this into so that we don't lose it, let us know in the comment section, because I'm kind of at a loss right now about how to seal this up. So
especially when it looks like that after you're done with it,
yeah,
huh?
that lid is wrecked. It was probably an old can. It was probably a little stuck more than it should have been, but in any case, like I said, thin layer, and it covers extremely well, and it sort of thickens as it dries. So even though it feels like you're not putting a lot on, it actually has excellent coverage and will dry into this really nice hard type finish. So I'm just going to take the...
And it's much better than just like an enamel, acrylic, or rust paint?
It's much tougher, yeah. It's similar to powder coating. I think it's kind of like a brush-on powder coat in some ways. Obviously, you're not baking it on the way you do with powder coating, so it probably doesn't adhere quite as well as a powder coat does, but...
It doesn't look as nice as powder coat.
It doesn't look as nice as powder coat either, but as a DIY alternative, I think it's a really good option for people that are looking for a true, like, permanent rust preventative barrier on metal parts like this. So off we go. I'm going to try to keep it off of any threads or surfaces that you don't want to be adding any thickness to, but I'm just going to work my way around here, and we will knock this thing out pretty quickly. It covers fast. Still a little tacky, but man, it is looking really good.
Yeah, this stuff dries exceptionally well. You weren't kidding. It's kind of like a paint-on powder coat.
It really is, and it's deceiving when you're applying it because it goes on really thin, and you can kind of, it looks a little
Has like
patchy,
air
and little
bubbles.
bubbles. But if you just let it sit, it just kind of flows and fills all the little valleys, and the bubbles go away. And I went back up and touched a few spots where it was a little thin, but overall, it actually has a really nice finish to it. It's not quite as nice as JP's powder coating, but for a hack like me to, have this turn out as good as it did, I think it really comes down to having blasted it beforehand.
Yeah,
'Cause
the
when we
prep
did
is
the
key.
BMW, we didn't blast it and it looked pretty cheesy, where this was so well prepped that it was just a matter of applying it and it looks great. So you can see the rest of it is still hanging here drying, but this piece looks fantastic. The finish on it is like really nice and smooth. You can see there's like no bubbles in it. It's nice. Now the other stuff that has, some texture to the surface doesn't have that really smooth look to it, but it's still going to do what we want it to do, and that's prevent more rust. So it'll be a good protective coating on there. And as far as getting rid of the rest of the rust that was on this car, it was just control arms and stuff like that, which, as we showed you earlier, JP took care of some of that for us, and Super Pro is taking care of the rest of it for us. They pretty much sent us their whole catalog of goodies for this car. We got it all, including control arms with their bushings in it, which these are a polyurethane bushing. And they also have a really durable coating that they put on them, which I think is pretty cool. They actually it's a 3-stage process that they do where there's like epoxy and then powder coating on top of the epoxy. So they say even the finish should last longer than the car. So that's exciting to hear, since the finish on the old sway bar did not last very long. So this sway bar should look new much longer.
We're going to start off here by installing our rear Super Pro bushing into our front lower control arm. And these are made for maximum caster adjustment. So what you want to do is line it up. They provide good instructions as to where you want it, but you do want it more inboard in terms of alignment like that. And I should mention that you can actually, Super Pro sells the whole arm with the bushing already pressed in. This is a more affordable way to do it, and as you can see, you really just need a press and a couple of tools here to make this work. And it really is a pretty quick and easy job, as I'm gonna show you. The other neat thing is actually Super Pro does sell a full press kit, so if you don't have a hydraulic press, you can buy their little press kit, which will allow you to do this job as well, so that you've got lots of options to get it in there. And look how smooth it's going, DP.
Looking
oh
good.
Man, how nice is that?
We are moving on to the rear diff mount. As you can see, this was also blasted by JP at Stripping Tech, and we've already pushed in one of these Super Pro bushings. We'll show you how to do it in a minute, but I think it's a pretty cool design that they've used here. It's got like this hexagonal shape to the center portion of the bushing, and that apparently reduces contact, so it's really only touching at sort of like the points of the hexagon. And by reducing the amount of contact that this is making with the housing here, it reduces NVH. It's kind of a neat idea, but apparently it's also got enough stiffness in it that when you really load, when the bushings are really being loaded up, it still does a very good job of reducing deflection. Probably partly because this bushing is a lot stiffer than stock. So let's push this guy in here, which we're just going to do on the bench vise.
Here we are, we've got our vise out, and what we're gonna do is line up our bushing with our opening in this brace here, and now you gotta go slowly. And as you'll see, it does want to kind of like break away and fall in place. So this is kind of tricky. It does take maybe 2 or 3 times to get right, but sometimes you can just keep going and it'll push through. But this may not be the case here. We'll see. Let's see if I can kind of squeeze it through here. Oh, it's getting close. And I'm gonna say we are not going to win this time. So what I'm gonna do here is actually put the sleeve into the bushing, which I did on the other side, and it helped kind of keep it in place. So we're just gonna line that in there. And now we're gonna reset this and try again. See, sometimes just gotta power it through. See, guys? There you go. We are onto our rear trailing arm here, and once again, Super Pro has done something very neat, and they've put these grooves into the bushing where the grease will reside. And in doing so, it ensures that these are going to be a squeak-free design. As long as you lube them up. The key here is always to make sure that you have enough lube. And then we're going to have to go through this process of pushing it again with the vise. But I think we have a technique kind of down here, although it does require using a second person. And who better than our buddy Moose? So now what we are doing is using 2 plates here to kind of keep everything from deflecting. And then let's just get it lined up first here, Moose. Okay. And we're now pushing it together while Moose holds it, and it is going to slip out like it always does. There you go, but you just power it through, you muscle it, and
Come on, baby.
there she
Oh,
goes.
yeah.
Look at that. So after doing this, I think, what, 4 times now?
Yeah.
I think we've got a technique that is worthwhile to report, that works, and you're not going to struggle with it. So this can be a tedious process, but with that technique there, we seem to have figured it out. It seems to work the best. I'm just going to push this metal sleeve out again one more time here just before I start smashing it. So here we go. This is very foreign to me, but this is how you got to do it, I guess. Wow, one hit.
One hit
Look at
wonder.
that.
Look at that.
Bam,
Moose
it
is
is in
proud of
place.
you.
Moose is proud of you.
That's right, Moose. I moosed that sucker real good, didn't I? If you watched a previous episode, you'll know we had a hell of a time removing these arms. They are completely rusted. And in removing them, we ended up destroying the ball joint. So I ended up ordering a set off of Rock Auto, which were in perfect shape. And I decided to remove the bushings, obviously, because we're replacing them with Super Pro ones. The front bushing, I think it was this one, came out very, very easily. Obviously, no rust there. Just pressed it out on the press. The rears, they're a 2-piece style bushing, and they were much more difficult. I actually had to saw the top portion off. As you can see, that kind of looks like it. I cut that off. Then I was able to press this piece out from the other side. And then finally, I had to come in with a saw. This one shows it, as you can see, with the Sawzall, and just like cut through the bushing itself so it would release and then push it out. Thankfully, the Super Pro bushings are 2-piece, and look how easy they go in. Yes, look at that. We're obviously going to lube these up, but that is as simple as an install as it gets. So with these in place, we also did the bottom bushing here with the Super Pro one on the spindle. And I think that is it for our bushing job here. I think it's time we assemble that subframe and try to get it back into the car.
Like that, we've got a rear end that's back in one piece, and it's looking mighty snazzy, if I do say so myself. This Por 15 semi-gloss is the finish you want. It's just, it looks correct automotively, I think.
Well, look at it. It matches that arm that we bought from
it perfectly
Rock
matches
Auto.
that arm, and it matches the Stripping Tech powder coat arm beautifully, so it is all just looking fresh and clean. Sadly, I painted the diff with the high gloss Por 15, and it looks like absolute garbage by comparison, partly because I scrubbed it a lot, as you saw, but it still wasn't as really nice a smooth a finish as you would get had we, say, taken it to Stripping Tech and had it blasted. But we didn't want to disassemble the diff to do that, so we got to live with that. But it's tucked up underneath the car.
Well,
We're never
and
going
it's
to see it
painted,
again.
so it's
And
all
it's painted.
good.
It's not going to rust again. But compared to the rest of it, which is a work of art, it kind of sticks out. But in any case, it's looking great all overall. And I should mention that these Super Pro camber arms give us camber adjustability here with the eccentric bolts, and the Super Pro tie arms, or toe arms, I should say, give us adjustability of the toe at the front here. We've got all our low compliance bushings in place, so we'll have a lot less variation happening in tow and camber and all that good stuff. I think it's actually time to bolt this thing back up underneath the car, PT. What do you say?
I think so, yeah, man.
Gotta say, that went up extremely easily.
It did.
Holy smokes, we were there. I just need to tighten down these bolts here, the four main bolts, and our subframe is in place.
Now that we've got the rear suspension all back in the car, we can bolt up our refreshed KWs. I guess we could call these KW Variant 3s now, even though they started life as a, was it Race Comp Engineering setup?
Yeah, it was.
We sent these back to KW, who were kind enough to rebuild these for us. You can see they put their new spring rates on here. We opted for their off-the-shelf Variant 3 spring rates, which, as you can see on the spring here, is 50 Newton meters or about 285 inch-pounds.
Moving up front, I'm about to install the front lower control arm, and I wanted to give you guys a quick view before I got underneath, which is going to be harder to see, of how the Super Pro bushing goes together up front here. And as we mentioned before, it's good for anti-lift and increased caster, which is nice. And as you can see, it uses the stock peg, and you put a bunch of metal sleeves and bushings on it, which come together like that and like that. So it's not a difficult install at all. It just requires you to remove this peg. So I'm going to put this on, and then DP is going to be able to bolt on some suspension once we get the whole front knuckle on here.
All right, Pete's done putting in the front lower control arm, and he also put in the front knuckle here, which looks fantastic, with Por 15 all over it. And he went so far as to put in our Super Pro tie rod and roll center correcting lower ball joint. As the name would imply, that ball joint is also a shim that puts the lower control arm back into a more optimized position for roll centers. So as you lower a car, your control arms get out of sort of their optimum geometrical positions, and that can actually cause more body roll. So this will prevent that from happening, and these tie rods are apparently optimized for bump steer geometry. So as the car goes over bumps and rolls, the car will want to steer if it has a non-optimized bump steer. This will get rid of that, so it'll be nice and stable over the bumps. Other than that, I think it is getting to be time to put in our front KWs. Obviously, they've been completely refreshed, just like the rears. And KW put on their off-the-shelf front spring rates for their STI application, which in this case is a 70 Newton meter spring, which converts to 400 pound-inch. It's got the nice tender spring up here to prevent spring rattle and all that good stuff. They're double adjustable, so we're able to tune in the handling, and we have left the top hat on that was on the car already. As you can see, it's got an offset top hat, which adds camber. So between that and the camber bolts on the strut here, I think we'll be able to dial camber into where we want it, and if not, we can always swap in a camber adjustable top hat at a later date. We spared you the horror of watching me bolt that front coil over there. It's 2 bolts on the bottom and 3 nuts on top. I think you guys can handle it. And I think that's a wrap on this episode, but before we wrap it, I will mention that we have this Super Pro 24 mil 2-way adjustable front sway bar to go in. It's a very nice piece and a very durable coating that should survive this Canadian environment.
We do have one in the rear as well.
We do, although it's on back order, so we don't have it yet. So you guys will see that in a future episode. I think it was last episode we talked about whether or not we wanted to keep these Rally Armor mud flaps on the car. It only had them on the front, strangely, and we just decided we preferred the cleanliness of the flapless look. So we removed
It's not
these.
an off-road machine, right?
No, exactly. We're not chucking any gravel around here. By the way, I got to say thanks again to JP at Stripping Tech. He did a great job powder coating these sway bar brackets. They look like new. This whole car is looking like new, PT. It's going to look even better when I'm in it, using it as my daily driver.
We will see about that.
We will see, and we will see soon, because, man, this thing is almost back to roller status. And after that, we got to put a motor in this thing, and I think we got a pretty sweet one to go in there. That JDM EJ207 stroker motor that we built as part of our Valvoline series. If you don't know what I'm talking about, jump on our channel. Go find that Valvoline engine build series, because she's a beauty. So thank you very much for watching, everyone. Really do appreciate it. Give us a thumbs up for more STI content. We got lots of wrenching and then lots of driving to do in this bad boy, so excited to get my summer driver all tuned up and ready to rip.